Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.
So I'm really excited to dive deep into your story and what you can share your experiences with other attorneys who love to learn.
Thank you so much, David. I'm so excited to be here.
As I said before, let's just have a good conversation. And I've done a lot of good research on you, and you've answered some questions that will give us some guidance. And I wanted just to take 3 minutes or not even 2 minutes. I'm just going to go through some of your sort of timeline just to help you out so you don't have to feel like you have to say it all in different points. And just to give us grounding of all that you've learned, at least in the past 10 to 15 years. You started your career in Cypress Shaw and international labor and employment law. For 8 years, you were in BigLaw. But then you decided in 2011, 2012, I want to be a certified coach. So you got certified by a group called IPEC. Then you became an entrepreneur. You founded the LeadWise Group to help coach other attorneys in BigLaw. But you do other things that actually I can relate to in my life as well. You volunteer for SCORE, which is an SBA mentoring program. I've done that in New York. You do that in Miami. It's a great organization to help out. You're also on the board of directors of the Wilmer Chamber of Commerce, which is awesome. I love you talk about, and we'll get into how relationships are such an important thing. Doing things like this is a big part of that. You then became certified again in another coaching program. And most recently, you got your MBA at Boston University while running your company. Did I miss anything big there? Or does that sort of cover the gamut? And we'll get into your hobbies as well, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, that sums it up. And when I think about my journey, I started in Russia, right? I think that's sort of for those people who have the immigrant background. So I'm a first generation immigrant. I moved to the States at the age of 20. And having gone to Russian version of law school, which is a 4-year degree university, which is similar to a bachelor's degree here. So you would think of it as like a bachelor's of law. And then I did law school again at USC because why not? Glutton for punishment. And just thinking about my journey when it first started in 1997, to this day, I remember the day I arrived to the States was June 22nd of 1997, to where I am now. Sometimes I have to pinch myself. But I do think really just focusing on kind of the topic of your podcast, it's that learning approach, adaptability, right? And not being attached necessarily to a very specific outcome or goal, using more as a guideline, but not be so attached because life can take you in so many different directions.
We were talking previously that of course, I did not move country for good. I moved to Barcelona for 2 years with my family and we moved back. And one of the reasons was I wanted to give my kids exposure to a world beyond the US and what it feels like, at least temporarily, to not speak the language, to feel like the immigrant. And I'm curious, you did that. And what do you think, what are some of the things that being an immigrant to the US helped shape your learning mindset? Because you come here, like, I can't imagine having to go to law school again and having to restart that. Is that something? Is there like some lessons there or some things that you had to like look through as you came here and started fresh?
Yeah, there's so many things. People often ask, how did you do it? You were 20, you were so young, you moved by yourself. When I moved with one of my cousins, she was a little bit younger than me. And honestly, it was a great time, right? You have all this independence suddenly, very little money, but a lot of independence. And I think this is the moment when I started to really expand my kind of comfort zone, right? Because number one, we don't speak the language, so we had to take language courses and get that up as quickly as we could. But also the cultural differences, right? You anticipate cultural differences, but there are obvious cultural differences, and then there are more subtle, assumed cultural differences that people don't necessarily talk about.
Like what?
For example, we go into sort of professional realm, right? It's okay, networking, how people build relationships, what's expected, what's not expected, what is correct behavior at lunch and what is not, it's not, or even easier than that, what topics is appropriate to get into and what is not, right? And you think about different cultures, and I think about the different dimensions when you go into kind of cultural intelligence conversation, right? There's different dimensions, and one of them is directness.
Out of curiosity, now I'm curious, like, and maybe you just answered it a little bit. Is
Yeah,
the Russian culture more direct than the US culture?
a lot more direct.
Like, for example, is there something you could think of off the top of your head that if you were at a business lunch in Russia versus the US that you could say there, but not here?
Yeah, like, for example, it's not uncommon or uncomfortable or inappropriate for people to say, yeah, how much do you make? And
I ask that all the
here,
time.
yeah, and here it's like it's a taboo, right? And not that it's inappropriate, just that, right? It's if you ask things like that, then you're automatically being seen as someone who is pushy, aggressive, right? So
Yeah.
it associates you with a certain type of personality, even if you're not that.
So
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 there's a
in
lot of little
Russia,
bits like that.
if that was asked, would people answer it? Would they be like, what are you, why are you ask? Is that something that you're direct in the question, but you're also direct? You have no problem answering it as
Yeah,
well?
two things, right? So your directness is about either answering it or being direct about how you feel about it, right? So you know what? I don't feel like answering.
Yeah, got it.
So
Instead of
there's
being like, oh my God, I can't believe you asked that.
so there's a lot less of sort of tap dancing around answers. There's a bit more directness, which is why I think sometimes people who, recently come from Russia, they're seen as rude, but it's not rudeness, it's directness. Or just saying, hey, you put on some pounds.
My father-in-law is Israeli, and Israelis have a reputation of being very direct as well.
As far as directness goes, Israel, I think, is at the top of
Yeah, I
that
would
list.
agree.
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
probably agree with that. There's a question I like to ask, and I'm going to throw it out to you to see where it takes us. Because you said, when I asked you about being an immigrant, and you said it's a question people often ask you, what was it like? And you do this a lot. Can you think about a question or a theme or a topic that people don't often ask you about that is actually, when you think about internally, you're like, oh, I wish I could talk about this more, how this helps shape your learning journey or your growth journey. But you always talk about these 5 points that we'll get to today. But I'm just curious if that question uncovers anything,
Yeah.
sparks anything in your head when I bring it up.
Yeah, I love that question. I think most of the time people are curious about the challenges, right? Okay, it was hard, right? There's certain assumptions that I think people make. Also, the transition from when I left, it was already well into the perestroika sort of process, but I lived
The
most of my
what?
life.
The what?
Perestroika, that you remember the perestroika process?
Can you tell me again? For
So I'll
those
talk.
who don't remember.
Yeah, yeah. So it was the time when sort of Soviet Union crumbled, it fell
Okay.
apart, and there was a new regime established. There was that transitional period. That was probably the toughest. And I think that's the part that people often make an assumption that this was the excited time of freedom and this sort of freedom of speech, opportunity. And it was, but there was also a lot of challenges.
Was that the part when essentially the Berlin Wall coming down was the beginning of that
Yeah.
period? Got it.
That's right. Yeah. So it was early 90s into late 90s, kind of very early 2000s. And so I left in 97. So I was there for the bulk of it. And it was filled with excitement, but it was also filled with really drastic and major societal challenges. There were food supplies were disrupted. Talk about chain supply and disruption. I mean, that was happening every day. Food shortages, long lines for everything. So it's just that period was really dramatic. And part of it is, I think, because there's a lot of influences coming and happening and impacting Russia. And as a society, you can't rebuild overnight, right? You're rebuilding society and culture and relationships. There's a lot of criminal elements started to come out because when there is moments of disruption, right, there's lots of people who will be interested to take advantage of that. I think that's a period that I'm probably most interested to talk about. And I think most people really want to hear about the Soviet times and how hard it was. Like, I was a kid, it was great.
So just to be clear, the area that you don't get to talk much about, but you feel like is actually a fundamental to who you are as a person was that 7 year period after the Soviet Union collapsed, before you moved to America, and there was a lot of instability there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. And so what, when you look back, and maybe it's something in reflection, you realize you are definitely a very driven person in any sense, at least on paper, right? In any sense of the words in every area. Is that a direct correlation to that period? Or let me not even pull that because I'm trying to pull that in. What are some of the things you want to talk about from that period that you think would be interesting to share?
Yeah, I do think it had an impact. I think just my general kind of view of challenges, and part of it has to do with just the way I'm wired, right? We all have different things we prioritize, and I see challenges as fun. There's plenty of challenges I don't want to deal with, right? But generally speaking, I try to think of challenge as an opportunity. There's always growth opportunity, there's always learning, right? There's an opportunity to test yourself, right? So to test my ability to recover, my resilience to overcome something. I think with over time, I started to pay more attention to not treat every single challenge as an opportunity to grow, because sometimes there are challenges that are just signals to go in a different direction. But I would say that's one.
And I feel like that was my fault because I pulled in. I try to get like lessons from it. I just maybe is there like a story from that time period that you want to share that you don't get to share often that was just like, I would love to like people know this is what happened and this is what shaped me from
Yeah.
that 7 years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean,
If
it's
not, we can move on. We can move on.
yeah, because a lot of the stories are a little dark, I would say,
Okay.
you know?
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. So
it was, I think the one I would can remember was the other day, my husband and I went walking in our neighborhood, and it was maybe like 9:30 in the evening, so it's dark, and we're just walking on the street, and it's a very residential neighborhood, but we're walking down the street, and there's no one, right? There's absolutely no one on the street. It's just the two of us. It's very quiet. And I'm walking down, and I had this feeling. I tell him, I just realized that I never forget to appreciate the fact that I can, many places here, I can walk without feeling for my safety, feeling worried for my safety. And I just remember growing up, especially those, and I'm a young teen at that time, that feeling of constantly being tense, right? There's a lot of, again, there was organized crime. We didn't have organized crime to speak of. And so there's a lot of that kind of element came out during that time. And just constantly having to be aware, right? Having to plan how you're going to approach, how you're going to walk, where you're going to go. I don't know if it's ever going to leave me, but that definitely one of the stories that sort of I
yeah.
remember.
Thank you for sharing that because it's just a reminder whenever you're talking to somebody, they all have history and a
Mm,
story and an experience. And one of the things that you talk about that's in your coaching and your beliefs is, and we all know this, but we forget it, is one of the most important things you can do is invest in relationships. And we're going to jump around just because I feel like when you get out of a linear order, it makes the conversation more interesting than versus then next. And
yeah.
so one of the ways that I try to approach building relationships is asking questions people care about, like growing up, like that 7 year period. But it's really difficult in many instances on the spot and to find, especially in a cocktail party or in general. So can you tell us a little bit more about this philosophy or what you realized it's not just about the work product and the relationships and is that something you work with your clients on? Is there, just take us through that a little bit more because we can all, as attorneys, as individuals, as people, use help to give tips and tricks to focus on that more.
Yeah, absolutely love this particular area. And I can tell you the way I came to this realization and why so much of the work that we do with attorneys we coach is focused on relationship building, especially as it applies to leadership and business development, is because I'm not naturally so good at it. And so I had to learn, I had to figure it out. The way relationships are built in sort of Russian culture is very different to how they're built here, right? In Russia, it's you're an outsider until you build that connection, and then you're in and you're in for good. A lot of the times your client relationship tends to develop into really these long-term, strong friendships, very intimate. So there's a lot of kind of line crossing going on. In the States, that culture is very different. So there's a lot of openness up front, right? But it's polite openness and there's a little bit of distance, and we keep people in that at that distance for quite a while. And the point you made about asking, deeper questions, that's such a powerful tool. And I, as a coach, that's what we do, right? We ask powerful questions. That is such a great way to get deep in your relationships, to understand your contacts, your clients, your colleagues on a deeper level, because that positions you to be able to provide true value, right? Things or information, relationships that they really care about.
Just to
But
put on a point you said, sorry to interrupt, go ahead.
yeah, okay.
Because I'm not naturally good at it either. And I'm like, the thing is, the first time you meet somebody, it's really easy to ask deep questions because you know nothing about them. What happens is after the second or the third or the fourth time, it becomes more difficult because nobody wants, now tell me this time in your life. And then it becomes really where you need to connect is through shared core values and beliefs. And usually that's sports teams, which I don't care about, or I don't know, a lot of, or hobbies or different things like that, or just talking about your kids or things like that. And I find that to be really challenging, especially in a professional setting. So I was just curious, for somebody who also isn't good at it, can you take us through, maybe, I don't know if you could, it's coaching me or something, but sometimes hearing how you would talk to me about it would help other people who are also trying to build their relationship versus just saying, here's the 5 things you need to do to improve your relationship.
Yeah. So I would say, and this is one of the things that we do with clients, right, in coaching conversations, is if we first is what's the purpose, right? So we say, okay, let's say the purpose is I want to deepen relationships with people in my network for business development purposes. Great. One, we need to understand who you have in your network. Who are the people? Think about it. I think about often my own network, and unless we put effort into it, how disjointed it often is. So, very rarely do we have a big picture view of all the relationships that we have.
I love that because it is really difficult. I actually I tried a CRM for like relationship building. I'm not going to mention it because it wasn't that good, but because I'm similar to you, I'm launching another book. And my first book, it was all about looking your network, building a launch team. And you forget like all the different circles of your networks that you have. Do you recommend like a CRM tool? Is there one that you recommend? How do you help people spend that time to figure out the different circles and networks and that process?
Yeah, David, my very simple answer is
Excel.
CRM is not the solution, right? CRM is a great tool. My recommendation is if your firm, right, if you're a lawyer in a firm, if your firm provides a CRM, use it, right? Usually firms invest into really high-end solutions. There's people in the firm who can help you figure it out. So do use it, right? If you don't, for whatever reason, it's too time consuming, just a spreadsheet, right? At a minimum, the basic thing. Yes, it gets a little bit more clunky, right, to use. It's not doing reminders, but there's online tools like, I think there's Monday.com or Smartsheets or things like that, or Asana. So they're basically spreadsheets on steroids, right? So they have more functionality to do reminders and connect data on your spreadsheet.
When you work with the client in this stage, how long does it take them to build this sort of over a 40,000 foot view of their network? Is it like all they need to do is sit down for a day and it's actually not that hard, or is it a lot more back and forth?
Yeah, so it's one of my favorite books that came out a couple years ago. It's called Who, Not How. Right. So who can you use in your sort of life, professional life, who can help you in this process? So assistants, right? Paralegals, can you draw people in? Because you're right, that process can be quite time consuming depending on how big your network is. If you can bring somebody for support to help you, usually we give that process a couple of weeks of, obviously not all day, every day, but just to take a couple of approaches. And the goal is identifying kind of places where your contacts live, right? You said, hey, I might be playing sports, right? Or my husband, for example, is huge into fantasy football, right? So he's in multiple leagues. He's got a ton of relationships. Golfing, right? Other clients, one of the clients I'm thinking about is involved in a charity organization, like really involved on the board. So tons of relationships there. So just thinking about where they might live, right? And then starting to pull them. And that first stage of process is getting everyone in. And if you look at it and you say, okay, this is such a kind of long potential I really don't see it, fine, you don't need to. Think about
Are you
LinkedIn
categorizing them at that time?
at stage 2.
Okay, let's get to stage 2.
Yeah, yeah. So then step 2 is really thinking about, and if we're talking about relationships for business development purpose, then you want to think about, okay, what kind of relationships can really help me move the needle forward as far as BD goes? There's only 3. So these are your prospective clients or organizations or people. So if you work with individuals as clients, so it's the people, sort of their kind of individual qualities. And if it is corporate clients, then it's still people, but it's specific roles within organizations. So that's 1, right? 2 is your referral sources. And for some practices, referral source is actually more valuable to invest in terms of relationship building than trying to pursue individual clients or prospective clients. And then final, it's a little bit different than referral sources, is your connectors and influencers. And actually, funny that we're talking about this. So I'm in the process of writing a book that's really focused on this. And I'll share a little bit of why this specific topic. So it's called The Nurture System: How Smart Lawyers Transform Relationships for Business Development Success. And this came out really from hundreds and hundreds of coaching conversations I've had over the last couple of decades, where people would say 3 things. I don't have a good network. I just don't think I have any valuable contacts there. That's 1. 2 is, if I think I have contacts, I just don't know how to approach them. How am I gonna do it? What am I gonna talk about? And 3 is, it just feels really uncomfortable. It just feels,
100% on every answer is, you're like reading my mind. So keep going, please.
yeah. And again, the way I came to this is I didn't approach it as someone who's just naturally magically good at it, right? There are people who are just born relationship builders. They don't think about it. And when you ask them how they do it, they can't necessarily explain it because it's innate. And so this book is likely not for them, right? If you are an amazing relationship builder, wonderful. We could probably teach all of us something. But for those of us who are not, the trick is to, number 1, release this pressure, this idea that we have in our head that if your relationship building is intentional, somehow it's not authentic. I hear this all the time. I want this to be natural. I want this to be authentic. I don't want this to feel forced. And
Sorry,
yeah.
I hate interrupting, but just so you give you a pause, just to build on that topic. I was recently at my friend's house for dinner, and he's going around asking people like what we like to. He already had everything made, but he's like, "What is your favorite dish? What is your?" And I'm like, "Why are you asking this? You already have all the food here." I just to know. So the next time you're gonna be here, I want to make sure everybody has something that's for them. And like he was like that wasn't natural. He just going around asking people, but he was like, to me, that's a pro networker who's really thinking about it. But like it wasn't a natural thing to do, but that's what he was. Does that relate to what you were saying?
Oh, totally. I love that example. Yeah, absolutely. And it very much can look like that, right? And what's interesting is we do this in our friendships all the time, right? Think about all of your kind of social or friend relationships where we'll be asking questions. We'll be thinking of something, a topic, or something happens, or a new show, and you will send it to a friend, right? We'll engage in conversations. But we say they happen naturally. We don't have to feel forced, right? Because we build friendships over these mutual points of interest, right? Shared values, shared interests, shared hobbies. And so there's always something there, right? To create that next interaction.
And that's why it was so easy when we moved to Barcelona. You think at this stage in our life, you've made all the friends you're going to make because we're in our mid 40s, we're busy, and then you go to Barcelona, and it's all expats, and everybody had the shared interest of getting to know other people. So literally within 100 days, we had 25 new couple friends, all very close. Many of them were still in contact, and it's just like, wow, like just changing environments, we created a whole new sense based on the shared connection of wanting to travel and explore and lead to new things. Of course, not everybody's going to move to a different country, and not everybody has that shared interest of sports. So that becomes the challenge, I think. Okay. Okay. Let's say you have the group and you have like a few hundred people who are really your close network. Is your goal to try to look at each one and figure out what your shared interest is in those things? Or am I pushing it too far? And is it just more like,
It's part of it, right? But first, you want to get clarity around what you believe this contact's value. And I don't mean intrinsic value as a human being, value for purposes of furthering your goals.
so this is professional goals we're talking about right now,
Yeah,
correct? Just to
professional
be
goals.
clear.
Yep, yep. I think when you meet someone in a more sort of natural, let's say, you go play pickleball or tennis or whatever, right? You meet people on the courts. Hey, let's play again. So there tends to be more natural points of interest, things that you come together for, right? And the relationship progresses that way. But in the professional environment, you really don't, right? And so where I see people struggle the most is I go to a networking event, I meet this great person, right? And maybe they're a potential client in terms of they fit within that category, or they're just a really interesting another lawyer who could be a referral source, but a great conversation. And then what? Right? What do you, because there isn't next thing that's planned. You're not working in a case together. You're not serving in the board together. You just met. So part of the challenge is what I see people often, we stop at saying, there's nothing, I don't see anything, and there's nothing that I can figure out quickly. And so we don't often invest enough time to understand what that next connection could be.
All right. So let's get to it. How do we do that?
You've alluded to it, but when you said asking questions, and they can be deeper, right? More kind of powerful questions. They can just be more simple questions. The interesting thing is, and again, I love my lawyer people, right? I'm one of them. We are definitely wired more and trained over the course of our careers to be tellers, not askers. There's a lot of telling, right, that often happens because we're used to being the ones that need to have the answers. But in business development, the telling happens at the very end, right, of that
Sure.
process.
Just out of curiosity, like when you say questions, and maybe this is again jumping ahead, but do you have favorite questions that you share with that, would be always good to ask people?
Yeah, I'll give you one of my favorites. So, generally speaking, questions and all kinds of questions. So, there's two little kind of my go-to tips. One is anytime you want to learn something about a person, but you think, oh, it's a little awkward to ask them, right? My favorite way to start is to say, I'm curious. And that little bit, that two, whatever it's 3 words, I'm curious, is enough to bring the pressure down and not make it like, oh, I'm being nosy. Let's say you're curious about their background or family. Oh, I'm curious. Where did you grow up and where did you go to school? Like little things, questions like that, but they can also apply to when you start to learn a little bit more about the business. Let's say what's going on with your company. I'm curious is such a disarming word that really helps people move forward with it. So that's one. Number two is my favorite question. What I hear from clients often is, how do I learn more about their company needs? When you think about expanding the work potentially that you might be doing with a client or starting to get to know someone professionally, again, it feels like I'm being intrusive and it feels like I'm fishing for this information so they can sell them something, right? So there's a lot of discomfort around that. So my top question is, I'm curious, right? What are the top 3 things, 3 challenges that as a company you're trying to tackle in the next 12 to 18 months?
You want me to answer? Was that because
Right?
I felt you did it so well? I didn't know if you were asking me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
let's see if I can. So it's a good question because it's a hard question, right? But it's also the I'm curious made me feel like, oh, okay, you're just trying to learn. You're not
Mhm.
trying to get something from me. And that I start thinking about, my mind's racing. Okay, what are challenges? What are conversations I've had recently? Oh yeah, we're launching a new product called CLE Studio that allows law firms and organizations to actually host their own CLE programs, their own accreditation, and do all the reporting, but it's not easy. So that's certainly one. And then we have internal growth with AI. Like we're trying to figure out internally, how do we integrate it with each role? But people are afraid because of, is this going to replace me? But how do we support them there? So that's in my mind. And then of course there's just like the basic growth, right? We're growing at X amount of rate, and we're like, we need to figure out how to go past and think outside the box. So maybe those are things that go through people's head. And I love it. And I felt like you really cared by saying that.
And that's the thing, that as long as you as the asker can prime yourself to be in discovery mode, right? Forget about trying to like look for an opening. You mentioned this. I can talk about what my firm does. This is not the time. This is really
Yeah.
being like almost like being an investigative journalist, right? Really being curious, asking questions, and really being in the space of asking. And if there is natural, hey, there's a tool, or I've read this book, or there's a video I want to share with you, offer it, right? But the focus isn't, because if we were to continue the conversation, I would have asked, wow, that sounds amazing. You tell me more about the AI challenges. Like what's
Yeah.
coming up, right? What are your clients saying? What are your main concerns? And the goal for lawyers is to avoid putting themselves in this narrow sort of tunnel vision space where they're trying to find legal issues.
Here, I hear you. The hardest challenge every company in sales deals with is, you can perfect the questions, you can perfect the thought leadership, you can perfect all of it. The hardest part always is like actually asking for the business at some point. And maybe it's a little different with law because it's like, it depends on what type of law it is. And so that's the, and maybe that's not what you work on at all. I think it is because you're focused on
Exactly what
relationship,
we work on.
of course. But like that, again, we only have a few, not enough time to give all the answers, but I'm just curious. Let's say you've perfected that moment. It's still the struggle of, I don't want to be pushy or salesy, and I don't want to have to just wait for them to ask me for business. So let's say you do a lot. How do you bridge that gap to being a little bit pushy or asking for business in the right way?
I think it's knowing your contact and understanding a little bit of their buying style. That's a sort of set of, and we have a learning module around that as well. But some people are comfortable being direct, right? They want to get into it. And what I find is most people will give you a signal, right? Sometimes based on where you lead the conversations to, they'll say, "Oh, interesting. Tell me about more about what you do for other clients, right, in this area. We might be interested." Right? Sometimes you have to bring that up as an option, as an offer, but it's all in how you phrase it. So one example is talk about mastering the ask, right? And most people think, again, this more limited view of, hey, why don't we do business together? And it feels yucky, right? For most people, it feels forced, like you're just pushing like a stereotypical salesperson. What's interesting is that for some of your contacts, that's going to be totally fine. They're
Yeah.
going to be
Yeah.
comfortable with that, right? Others, there are other ways to move the conversation in that direction. So now we get a little bit into the heart of relationship nurture. Most
Follow up.
follow up, right?
Yeah.
But even before, okay, so here's like my little bit here. I distinguish follow up and nurture. They're not the same things. Follow up is you have specific opportunity on the table, whatever it is. They said, hey, let's grab lunch together. Okay, opportunity, right? Or I want to talk about X, whatever. Or yeah, let's go to this conference together. This is a specific moment, event, opportunity. When you're following up relevant to that, right? Let's schedule it. Let's go. Let's do it. Give me more information so we can move forward to whatever that goal is. That's follow up. Nurture doesn't have any specific goals. Nurture is ongoing, proactive, intentional investment in deepening that relationship. And so when you talk about being a trusted advisor, right, that's how you become one, is that you have enough of these conversations, and over time you have an opportunity to expand them beyond the work that you might be just doing with this client, right? Which I see a lot of times lawyers get stuck and they say, well, I don't know how to go beyond it, right? There are different ways that we can do that. But nurture is at the heart of maintaining relationships in that more of a close proximity so that when the client does have a need, you're one of the people they think of.
I'm curious.
I like that.
When you ask the question, I'm curious because I like that technique as I just did. Can it be, is that something you use sparingly in your conversations, or like every question should I start off with, I'm curious, because now I want to use it, but I want to get a sense of what your thoughts are there?
Yeah. I think sparingly is probably a good way to think about it. And I personally use it if I'm in a situation where I start to feel like I want to ask the question, but maybe I say, oh, I don't know if maybe that'd be a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's a good one to ask. Or if you think, I'm going to ask this question and I don't want the other person to feel uncomfortable, because we all have different level of tolerance for business conversations or
Got it.
anything that's perceived as sales. Some people are very sales averse, including our clients. So how can we create an environment where it doesn't feel pressured?
Got it. And so a great, like, maybe that wasn't the right question for it, but when I asked you about, like, if I said, I'm curious, can you share a little bit more about what it was like living in Russia during that time? It just softens the blow a little bit versus like, tell me what happened. So no, that makes it so uncomfortable a good thing. Let me ask one more questions about this, and I'm going to move on just because we don't have the time. And
Oh my
I
gosh.
know anybody who's heard all this is, my first thing is, oh my God, I need to hire her. And again, this is not a sales pitch for you, but it's like, I'm like, wow, she's good. And now I know why she's doing this. And I love people who are lawyers and then move to coaches. For me, it's a small thing, but I try to move away from conversations over Zoom and at lunch, because you can do lunch once or whatever. I love walking and talking. I love being in the park. Is there any things like that? And you mentioned racquetball, you mentioned sports again, and maybe there's not, because what else could there be? But have you ever heard any cool, interesting stories from clients of cool ways they've used to connect with prospects or nurture the relationships that weren't traditional things that you think about?
Yeah, I absolutely. So I was immediately thought of one client. So she is IP lawyer out in London, and it was so delightful to work with her because she was actually quite natural at people. She really liked people, but had this thing where she said, "Oh, I feel so inauthentic when I try to do this because I see them as potential business opportunity." So mindset, we did a lot of work around that. But she had this one contact with whom she worked, did a little bit of work, and started to invite her to things like the Christmas market, hey, there's a new interesting kind of tasting menu experience where you're not just sitting and eating, but there's education right around that. So it was almost like a combination of, we could do this together or we can learn something together.
Yeah.
And over a course of a few of these different things, the quality of your conversations shifts completely. And there's also, this is just neuroscience, right? When you're in a proximity with someone doing something together, right? Your neurons, your sort of brain waves start to sync in an entirely different way. If you're just having lunch and it's already good, right? Because you're with each other present, but that sort of way
Totally.
of doing that could be a really fun way.
I don't know if your book, are you still writing the book, or is it completed?
I am in the final stages.
Is there any section, if one idea doesn't have to be in the book, it can just be in tips. If you can give as many ideas and examples of things that are outside the box to that, I think that would go a long way with people. Because like first thing I thought of is cooking class or just different cool things versus like just going to a sports event or just like things where you're like, oh, this is a story we can tell about later and how we grew in that. And ideally you enjoy that person and you're getting value out of that as well. So I love that. All right. So thank you for that, boxing this conversation. In the last few minutes, a couple other topics. One, why did you get an MBA as a professional already? What were you looking to get out of it? Did you get that? Take us through that a little bit, because I just feel like as a working professional, my instinct is an MBA is too structured and too much packaging around it versus just taking a certification and this or that. So I'm just curious what you got out of that experience.
Yeah, I've thought about doing an MBA for 20 something years, right? I graduated from, in fact, before I went to law school, I actually debated between the two. And I chose law school because my mother's a lawyer, my father's a lawyer, my sister became a lawyer. So I have this family of lawyers, and maybe there's a little bit of family pressure. But I thought about it for a long time, and just, exactly what you said, like, but do I really need this sort of the entire degree? And what I realized, and this is maybe more specific to me and the work that I do, but what I really wanted from the experience is to get in a place of having a really clear, big picture view of the economy, the way business is done, right? All the different processes, the management of the company, external forces, internal forces. And when I think, as especially as an entrepreneur, a business professional, legal professional, we tend to look for solutions to fix more immediate problems. But I don't know that we have time, right? Or create enough time to zoom out,
Sure.
see how things connect and how they operate.
So one, it was a bucket list item for you, it sounds like. So you wanted to check that off. Were your with the honest assessment, did it meet your expectations? If so, where?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thrilled that I did it. It was a tough 2 years because
Online or in person?
online,
Okay,
I wouldn't be able to.
for sure.
Yeah. It was tough, right? Because my business, in fact, our business grew by, I think that first year it was like 20%, and then the following year, 30%. There was still a lot going on, and team grew. It really, one of the things, and I'm always on the hunt for better, right? For our company, but also for our clients. So different frameworks, different angles, right? Examples, case studies, just the way content is delivered, right? That's something I can implement in our work as well.
I'm curious if you can give me your biggest specific takeaway off the top of your head from school that would be valuable to share here, if that's
Yeah,
possible.
totally. Yeah.
I'm just trying to use I'm curious as much as possible. Sorry.
Good. No, it works. And you know what? And just being on the receiving end, it's the minute you say I'm curious, there's something inside. I go, oh yeah,
There's
tell
no
me what you
judgment. It takes away the judgment. Yeah.
It does, it does. And it takes away this sort of question in, I think, the person's head of like, why is he asking? Yeah. I think what I would, and again, it might be personal to me, right? But what I would share as the biggest takeaway is thinking about sort of business from that kind of higher vantage point. It's there's strategies, there's numbers, there's all these things. But the one thing that I keep seeing, and I see it through my work as well, is the people component is often the one that it either makes it work or breaks it down.
Let me switch it. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to say that I was really happy that in this program we had dedicated almost an entire semester to really business leadership and frameworks and conversations and challenges from more an individual perspective as a leader yourself, but also leading and managing others, how leaders can derail, things like that.
You might have just answered my question. It was, what was your favorite class?
Yeah, I would say leadership. I can tell you one would definitely anything that had to do with math or doing a lot of formulas and spreadsheets. It's not my favorite. That's not where I naturally gravitate, but business strategy. And I loved marketing. marketing, all the marketing conversations were really interesting.
And these classes are done on like a Zoom, maybe it's not Zoom, but it's live. It's live. It's not async. Maybe some of it's asynchronous, but the class is synchronous. Is that?
Correct. Yeah. So you have both. You have recorded modules. There's a lot of kind of homework. There's pod work. There's a lot of teamwork on assignments, which is very different. And going through law school now being an environment where there's a lot of teamwork and your grade is being judged on the quality of the product the team produces, that was tough, right? Because those
Yeah.
most lawyers, I mean, it's your individual performance versus team.
One of the things that people who've gone to business school in person at least say is the biggest takeaway is actually the network you get from it. Do you find online you're actually able to build, being a pro in relationships, you're actually able to build relationships that are lasting past school and that are valuable to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, I think here is you have to be intentional, right? Because you're not constantly around people sitting in the library, bumping into them in the hallway. It's the same problem right now that's happening with our clients and firms, right? Where people are not in the office and they say, oh, collaboration is suffering. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're not randomly seeing someone, right? So we have to be more intentional in creating these opportunities. But I think it is. I think it's possible.
And is it the same? Maybe it's what, 20%? I don't know. Is it the same price or just a little bit lower than in person to do MBA online?
And there are a lot of different, Boston does it. I think there's a few more schools that are starting to do it. Why wouldn't they? If
Yeah.
there's demand. I also think that online programs like that, there's added unique benefit to it is that there's a lot of international students.
Yeah.
So you have this really different perspective from
How
people.
large was a given class that was like where you saw a lot of, do you see everyone's faces in it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was like 400 people.
Oh, that's
So
a lot of people. So it's
yeah.
not like it's not like a group of 20 people where you get to know them.
Yeah, but you do because you do a lot of
Small
work in
groups.
smaller pods.
Got
Yeah.
it. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I run an online education business, continuing education. They're 1 hour courses. You do 20 credits a year or 12 credits a year, depending on the state. I don't know if I have the attention span to do an online MBA like that, but nor I have the energy to want to go to do it in person. And so I commend you for that. And I'm especially with 400 other people in the room. And I'm just curious. It'll be interesting to see how AI changes the game when it comes to personalized learning. The other day, my daughter, who's a senior in high school, was having a couple hours back and forth talking to ChatGPT, who was tutoring her on science. And it was telling her the answer. Then she would be like, slow down. Can you rephrase it? Can you say it like this? Here's my question. And instead of giving her the answer, it would say, let me ask you this, because there's a study and learn mode now. And I think that to me, and again, don't have the time today, but the personalized learning versus being in a room of 400, I see as the future of education and online education to some degree. So we'll see how that continues to evolve.
I'm just going to throw a quick little point here. That's going to be huge, and it already is changing how people learn, right? And because the way, just generally speaking, our educational system is set up, it's designed for a certain type of learner, most of it, right? It tends to be a lecture style, you receive information, and then you're supposed to process it, learn, and move on. The problem is that a lot of people, myself included, I'm an external processor.
Yeah.
For me to really get things, it's not that I need to just be talking to someone. I need to hear myself articulate things, and then they enter my ears, my brain in a different way, and then things click. So that back and forth that your daughter was doing, very likely she's much more of an external processor because that helps her cement her knowledge and understanding versus just taking notes, right? Or reading.
100%.
Yeah.
We just did a personality testing with our entire company through Type Coach. My friend actually was living in Barcelona with me, who runs the company, and we have everyone's personalities and how we interact with each other. And I'm an ENTP. And one of the things that became clear to me is I am definitely an external processor. I need to talk it out with somebody. And what is important about that is you need to understand if you are talking or collaborating with somebody who's an internal, don't take everything that they're saying as this is what they want to do. They just need to talk it out with you, which is separate and apart from the conversation we were having.
Yeah.
But like
We could do a whole other discussion on that.
all important stuff. last question I want to leave you on, two more questions. One is about your hobbies. You love to play piano.
Learning how to play piano.
Learning how to play
Just
piano.
started.
Maybe you don't love it, but you're learning how to play piano. My wife had done that. We learned a new language. One of the reasons she does it, in addition to the hobby, is they say that's a good way to keep off Alzheimer's and keep your brain sharp and keep those connections going. Is that sort of one of the motivator factors for you, in addition to the love, just to always have something keeping your mind working?
I think for me, the health benefit, it's probably just more secondary, just it's good to know. I don't think I can live. Like I wouldn't survive if I couldn't try new things. I think of myself, I used to beat myself up and think, oh, I don't, somebody has this hobby. Like, for example, I keep bringing my husband up. He's in the next room and he is a golfer, right? He loves golf. His passion, he golfs every weekend. He invests a lot of time into it, loves it. I don't have the one thing. So I figured that I'm more of a, I like to try different hobbies and jump around. And sometimes I stick with them, sometimes I don't. I've painted, I've done different types of painting. I took singing lessons, acting lessons. I like taking courses, sometimes random knowledge, AI courses, that things that I might never use, but they seem interesting to me. And it's just the way it tickles my brain. And I do think it makes me maybe a more interesting conversationalist, right? Sometimes I'll throw things into the trainings we're doing that really interesting or surprising, and that kind of enriches the experience.
Yeah. Wow. Actually, I think that's the perfect way to end this conversation. One, I selfishly started this podcast because I love learning from people and meeting new people. By the way, I started this podcast for the very selfish reason to build more relationships. So that is certainly an excuse for any attorney who's out there or anybody. A podcast allows you to meet amazing new people like you, learn from them. Then so many times I have conversations like this where it's just one-on-one. I'm like, oh man, I wish other people could have heard what Yuliya just said. And then it allows me to do that, put it out there, let it live out there. And so you're a great example of someone who's enriched my life just in 1 hour. And I hope this is the beginning of a shared connection, a shared experience we just had together that, and I go to Miami a lot because of my in-laws. I will actually, now that I know that, or you're in Boca, my dad's there, we'll find a time to connect next time we're there in person, and we won't do a lunch. We won't do that. We'll find something unique and interesting. Maybe even there's actually cool trails in Boca that I've done with my dad that are, you wouldn't think that, right? You're like, whoa, how can you do hiking in Boca? They have little parks. I'm sure you've been to them before. Thanks for taking the time. We all got a ton out of this, and I will look forward to what we can learn together in the future.
Love it. It was such a pleasure being here. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.